Hello and welcome to the Move Your Business Forward podcast. These talks are hosted by Boll, founder of Evoke Management and CEO of International Leaders UK. He'll be talking with experts from both these companies about issues that affect SME companies today.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this series of the Move Your Business Forward podcast, specifically focused on the campaign we're doing of the Big Squeeze. So many companies right now are struggling with similar things. Inflation driving prices up, which is a big challenge for companies. Supply chain issues and things getting hard to get a hold of and come through into businesses. And lastly, recruiting and retaining staff is a big problem at the moment. We're going to talk today about branding, because branding is one of a number of things that's within every business's control to work on. You're not reliant on other people to improve your positioning and your branding. And thought it'd be useful to have a conversation about that today. I'm joined with two of my colleagues from Evoke, Sam and Dee. They're both commercial directors at Evoke, so they help companies on various things, anything commercial, helping them plan out for business growth, touching on marketing, branding, and anything else that's going to improve the performance of a business. So hello both, welcome, and thank you for being here today. One of the things I thought we should start with is just thinking top tips. Okay, we're in a position where there's lots of challenges, lots of things going on. What's the top tip, if I come to you, Sam, for any business to think about in terms of building a compelling brand? Any thoughts?
Yes, so I think it's worth noting that when we're talking about branding, it's definitely and nearly always been a marketing strategy. But recently, or in the past few years, it's starting to emerge more as a corporate strategy, and investing in your brand and managing its reputation goes beyond marketing and is a strategy that should be and needs to be driven by the CEO and top management. You look at all the global brands that we've got out there, the Coca-Colas and the Gillettes and the Googles and the Amazon, the ones that are doing it well have gained this kind of certain brand power that's allowed them to drive their growth through their reputation, but also the relationship with their customers. So if you're looking to maintain your market leadership and your profitability of certain products or even certain businesses, you have to realize that it needs to be driven through your brand value. And growing this power and using this value as a driver for your profit needs or must come from the top. My number one starter is to make sure that you have a main strategy as your brand.
It's interesting, actually, all of this you covered there, Sam. I think some people wouldn't necessarily fit them as part of your brand. So the trust piece, your customer experience, all of that is all part of the same thing, right? And you've mentioned a few things there. People might be thinking, hang on, actually, am I capturing all these things in branding? Because often people think branding, have we got a nice logo or a nice font type or whatever, but it's actually much more than that, isn't it?
Very much so. And other top tips, you're going to give them all away early now, that I would suggest also include putting your customer first, homing in on them, addressing them, understanding your customer's journey, using them as advocates, getting them to talk about your business and the experience that they have with it. Locking down your brand identity is another really important thing to do. Does everyone know your purpose and your personality and your proposition? How is your brand being read by your customers? Is it consistent? Are all your messages in line? Do you have a strong purpose? Does everyone in your business believe and know what this purpose is? You all go right back almost to the basics of what are your USPs? Are they very clear? Do your customers know what they are? Do you know what they are? Does everyone in your business know what they are? And then tell your story and tell it consistently. I think that's quite important.
So there's quite a bit there to cover already. So let's if we
throwing loads at you.
If we take a step back to the whole brand strategy, the kind of concept of a top level brand strategy led from the top and then everyone else on board with it. I think that's an interesting thing to talk through in a bit more detail. I don't know, Dee, if you've got any thoughts or experience of a a good brand strategy? If not, we can lean on Sam for some more thoughts around that, but it'd be good.
No, I think everything that Sam is saying, and it's a lot to actually take in, but at a most basic level, when you're thinking about a brand, and there are the business benefits, which, you are going back to USPs, is this about your product or your service? It can actually help to add on to the pricing and the positioning as well. But when you're actually, say you're a startup, okay, the one thing that's really important is to look at your story, our story, which is you and your customers, and this applies to whether you're B2B or B2C, and their story, so that your brand encompasses all those three aspects so that the message is clear. And it's also, you were talking earlier about logos and things. It's about having what I call distinctive memory assets. Why do we remember certain brands more than others? It's because actually it triggers a memory that we have. And those assets are very important. And as Sam said earlier, branding is about getting return on investment. It's about positioning. And now the big brands, and if you look at the big corporates, they actually have it as equity on their bottom line of their business. And you can start doing that even as a startup. So, if you imagine the equity that, Coca-Cola, for example, put at the bottom of their line, P&L, it's incredible. It's worth hundreds of US dollars, millions, I should say. You can start doing that even as, an SME. And it's very important. And it's an important identity for your brand to be out there that you can then build on, to have that equity, to have that return on investment. And it's about the perception, as Sam said earlier as well. And how do you put a value on that? The better your brand is, the better it's interacting, the more you actually have an opportunity about growing your business on the price point as well, because it's seen as valuable.
No, great.
So,
Thank you, Dee. Yeah, I think there's some really useful points there. And I think coming back to Sam, what you were talking about, the purpose and the brand values, I think some of that's important, isn't it? To just get right and revisit as well, because I think these things have changed probably over the last 2 years with pandemic and everything. I think it's a really good opportunity to remind people within the business, especially, and then people outside of the business, what that's all about. I don't know, Sam, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think when you're looking at your strategy, I mentioned it earlier, but you need to know your audience, discover what matters with them. If you already have a brand established, have you addressed any changes in their buyer behavior? So kind of go back to the drawing board and look with your brand strategy and look at your audience in detail again. Also, another thing that you mentioned, Rob, look at your mission. We all have our mission statements and our visions and our objectives, and kind of as a rule of thumb, your vision is where you want to be in your next 5-10 years. Your mission statement can and probably should change and be looked at every 3 to 5 years. And this is important because that in itself will drive your objectives, which in turn will drive you as a company and your brand and your values. You need to, so we've said, know your audience, know your mission, know your competition. What's your competition doing out there? Are they doing what you're doing? Are they doing something different? Is your customer aware of what your competition's doing? And then, as I said earlier, I threw on in there, look at your USPs, your unique selling proposition. Why are you? Why are your products good? And then tell the world and be consistent about it.
And all of this, just as you were saying that, Sam, I was thinking this fixes a number of issues I talked at the beginning of this podcast, right? The fact that people are struggling to retain and attract staff. If you get your mission and how you shout about that correct, you'll get people wanting to join you and stay with you because you're very clear about that. And you've got it on point for whatever the business is you've got. And again, driving up, being able to sell things at a higher price to match inflation, especially when your costs are going up. It put your prices up because everyone else is having to, but building in that extra value proposition through what your brand represents and says is only going to help with that.
Yeah, I think positioning is really important. Again, what Dee said, how you position yourself in the market is going to determine how you're perceived in relation to your competitors by anyone, be it your current audience or your potential audience. So knowing whether or not you are going to be more price-led or quality-driven, or where you're going to sit in and amongst your competitors. And that isn't necessarily stagnant or set in stone. These things can move and can move continuously, but it will also help you adapt your other corporate strategy around your branding strategy, is whether or not you need to develop current products or develop newer products or move into newer markets with a newer audience. So it starts to drive that focus forward as well, but always maintaining your brand values. I think that's important.
Absolutely. And consistency. I mean, one of the things that branding, if you're looking at branding and if you're starting to create a new brand for your business, is look at your brand archetypes, okay? Because that really generates the personality of your brand, and also make sure that that personality fits in. So if you use some of the big boy examples or even a local one, I'm currently working with somebody who actually has already developed their brand and are looking to reevaluate it. They're in the fintech sector, but the brand doesn't actually communicate what it is that they do, and people are actually thinking they're in a completely different sector. So that's a classic example. They haven't used the colors that would identify technology or finance, for example. And what they've done is used a font type that actually says so much more about children education than it does about them actually being really quite, and this is a medium-sized company with over 35 people doing an incredible turnover, but nobody gets what their branding is about. So they don't actually see it of value, kind of go, this is about children education, and then suddenly realize, actually, no, it's a fintech. It's been going for about 5 years, but we don't understand what they do.
Yeah.
And they're keeping it consistent, but the problem is they've totally misunderstood how to communicate that to clients, and it's B2B, by the way, to staff, and that message coming through. So it's really important to spend a little bit of extra time when you're actually creating your brand at the very beginning. And colors are very important. Colors are fundamentally important. For example, you use blue on the whole for something that's pretty water orientated, but you would not use pink. Unless you're saying it's water, it's aimed at a specific target. So all of this exists actually on the internet. You can Google it all, you can search it all, but it's just bear that in mind when you're actually doing that and keeping consistent, because that devalues what you've actually got rather than adds value. And as Sam and Rob, you were saying earlier, it's about building the business, increasing price points if needed, having that reputation in the market that you're doing something different. And also retaining staff, and people want to have that on their resume, that, hey, I work for XYZ company, and people go, oh gosh, I know that. That's pretty well known.
It's quite interesting as well, actually, because the three of us were at the business show last week and for 2 days, and when you walk around and see other people's stands and how they're presenting themselves, and I went around a couple of times and just think, right, can I guess what this person does within just a first glance? And in most cases you can't, but then there's the odd one that you can. And it's quite interesting how off target someone is. There's some people I spoke to, having spoken to them, I still didn't even understand what they did. But just that first glance check, I think, is really, really important and often overlooked. And as consumers, it impacts us in all kinds of ways. But it's about, how do you get this right for your business? And I think also, from my take and how I've seen companies do well with this, there's the starting point, and I might have a different opinion on this, but starting point with that mission and values of the business, then start building on how you represent that in all formats. There's a point you need to bring in experts, because we just don't know what these little tricks are with different colors and the ways things look depending on the sector. And I think there is a point where you have to go, right, we've got everything I think we can do to give someone a brief that they can then make everything look pretty from that side of branding, would be my kind of simplistic terms of this journey. I don't know, Sam, does that fit in with your having a high level plan? Does that fit at all?
No, it does, definitely. But I think also it's natural when you're sleeping and thinking your own brand, that you forget that people might not know what makes you unique.
Yeah.
People might not know why it is important for them to care about you and your business. And I think it's important that you are constantly doing, or every decision that you are making, and every output that is going out, be it pricing, promotion, logos, doing a trade show, that it all encompasses those values, those brand values, you know, why you are unique and why people should be interested in you and your business. And it's not always as obvious as you think it is.
Yeah.
And I think having an external person come in always helps you see things from a different perspective, or maybe something you've missed, or again, just someone completely fresh to bounce ideas off or move a strategy forward in a direction you might not have considered at that moment in time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dees, any further tips that you've got or thoughts as to building this concept of a compelling brand?
I think it's Sam actually said it, to be honest. I mean, you know, for all SMEs, they're so busy in running the business, which is totally understandable in the current climate. Having that outside perspective through, you know, either talking to people like ourselves to give them a perspective, through market research, through even, you know, crowd researching on several sites. It's actually quite helpful to actually say, what do my existing customers think about myself and my brand at the moment and what we provide, to going, what would you like to see? And I think it's one of the fundamental important things to make sure that your mission and the value of your organization is set up at the beginning the correct way in getting that input in, or that feedback, if you like, because it's a hugely valuable thing to do. And again, you know, marketing comes last sometimes, even branding, in, you know, when you're doing a startup or, you know, you're running the day-to-day business, and it's something that really does add value, and you can track it at the end of the day if you use it the right way, and it will show you the value add within the business and the organization, as well as the value add externally in terms of your customers, whether it's B2B or B2C.
Yeah, 100%. No, agreed. So any other top tips for any business owner or leadership team of an SME business to kind of help them on this journey? I think there's things obviously that we can control at the moment and things that we can't. And I think this is just top tips on things that are within your control. What can you go and tweak or look at for the next 6 weeks of this year, for example?
I think some quick wins that are kind of not cash constraints are, if you're not, get on all platforms, social media, and build your profiles. Who you are, what you do, who you serve, and your why, your business why. Go back over your USPs, which we've spoken about loads on this podcast. Why are you different? Why do you stand out? Why you? And again, demonstrate this every time you connect. So that's going back to knowing your customer or the customer journey. I think also another big one is engage with other brands. At the moment, customers are craving community. So go and give it to them. Create that community. Help get word out about other brands as well as your own. All of this creates value. It creates that customer's trust in you as a business. And then I think my other final quick win is tell your story. Stories are more, Dee said it, stories are so important in our day-to-day lives, and people are more likely to remember you as a business and share their knowledge of you as a business when they hear your stories.
No, it's great. Thank you, Sam. That's really good. Dee, anything else to add to those?
No, I think Sam's covered it. It is literally about getting all those touch points and saying my story, our story together, your story, which is fundamentally important. And the distinctive memory assets for me are a real must. So do spend some time making sure that people recognize you, whether it's the squiggle with, you know, the purple dots. If it's something that you want as the image of your brand and it conveys those stories, because the 3 stories overlap, consistency across all touch points and the storytelling is very, very important. And you know, the big brands, that's how they evolve. That's how they've actually grown. And it's about sticking with it. I have a little funny story to finish with, where Coca-Cola once tried to change the logo Coca-Cola, which is always red and white. They had the most awful disaster, having spent so much money changing it, that people just went, no, don't know it, don't like it, doesn't say anything about what Coca-Cola stood for. And they had to revert back 3 months later to the original design. There you go. They listened, but they thought that they could change it. But, the consistency was the much more important part of it for their consumers. And I found that to be a wonderful story, with the backdrop of, you don't want to know how much Coca-Cola actually decided, spent on changing it. That lasted 3 months, basically. So be careful. Be careful about that.
I think with
for the sake of change is not a good idea.
And I think the thing is, with these SME companies that we work with, you don't need to make big investments in changing things. You just got to build on what you've got and keep tweaking it and keep it consistent is the important thing.
Absolutely. And Sam will probably concur on this. You shouldn't really have more than 10 to 15% of, your turnover being spent as your marketing budget, and even less is a smarter move. The average is 10 to 15%. But then, we're talking about big corporations. If you're an SME, you could actually do it much smarter and at a much lower percentage. But it is important to keep that consistency, to have that budget on a continuous basis within your spend, because that's where the message goes out. That's where the story goes out. That's where the consistency is. And that's where the recognition builds up over a period of time. So it's an important part of your cost base.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. We're running out of time for this, so just final last thoughts on branding. Sam, any final tip you want to share or add?
Just ultimately, a strong brand gives you your business value. So just go and build that brand.
Yeah, perfect. And Dee, any final tip?
A strong brand gives you value in terms of the product and the service that you're providing as well. And that also helps within the business and your price points. And that's very important for SMEs, especially in today's world.
Perfect. Great. Thank you both. I really enjoyed the discussion today. So thank you for contributing, and look forward to having you on another one of these at some point as well. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like more information about the topics discussed in this podcast, then you can find us on our website at moveyourbusinessforward.com.